58,000 U.S. soldiers and an estimated 2 to 4 million Vietnamese people died in the Vietnam War. The tragic nature of Vietnam was a turning point in American history. It fundamentally shattered United States citizens' view of their own government. Since many Americans were no longer willing to believe that America was always justified in their war efforts, the government's level of credibility was always in question. Sparking massive controversy, the Vietnam War altered the nature of the American government's operations. Western European nations struggling to rebuild after World War II and to curtail local communist parties looked to the United States as an ally to maintain their colonies. The United States entered Vietnam as an aid to French troops who were trying to regain control of Vietnam after a disconcerting fight in World War II. The Cold War began after 1947 and was a period of geopolitical tension between the Communist Soviet Union and the capitalist United States of America and its allies. The Vietnam War was, in many people's eyes, a proxy war of these two world superpowers. With the advent of nuclear power, the world was at a hostile standstill, and every move by either party was closely monitored. Vietnam, a small and precedingly insignificant country to both the US and USSR, now held great weight with its decision to, at least in the eyes of American policymakers, side with the USSR and communism, after the US chose to aid French troops. Vietnam was seen as the first of possibly many governments in Southeast Asia to try to convert to communism. The United States was determined to stop this spread before it started, while Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Workers' Party of Vietnam, and his following gained a major political role. America's collective national spirit was high, coming off of a victory against Hitler and Nazi Germany, creating a deep trust and pride in the American government by its citizens. Before and during the early stages of the war, citizens were made to believe that America was always right. A vehemently patriotic anti-communist sentiment took form. Americans were prepared for war. While they were keeping the level of their involvement hidden from the public, the escalation in the war demanded a large infantry. And, for the sixth war in American history, the government held a lottery draft. The draft exposed inequalities between the classes, with people of color and the working class finding themselves being disproportionately sent to combat in Vietnam.
My name is Camilo Bica. Everyone calls me Mac. You can as well. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, Canarsie. I now live way out on Long Island.
Okay, my name is Jack Hirsch. I served in Vietnam, 1969, throughout the entire year of 1969. I came, New York, Bronx, New York is where I grew up, went to school, high school, Taft High School, Bronx Community College, and then I was drafted and wound up going to Vietnam in 1969.
I served in the military from 67, 68, and 69.
My name is John Ketwig. I went into the Army on December 30th, 1966. Went to Vietnam September of 67 until September of 68. I had enlisted to beat the draft, so I had a 3-year obligation.
I was born in Fresno, California. I was raised in Southern California, mostly. Small town called Canoga Park, and actually went to high school there. I was in school there when I was drafted.
They had 3 ways of going into the military back then. You could be drafted, which was for 2 years. You could be enlisting for any amount of time, and then you could volunteer for the draft, which was like one of those fuzzy things in between, which said, I don't want to enlist for an extended amount of time, but I want to go in now. And so that's what I did. I was in the 101st Airborne Division.
I served in Vietnam, 1969, throughout the entire year of 1969. And I served with the 3rd Brigade, 82nd Airborne.
I had enlisted to beat the draft, so I had a 3-year obligation. with all the news of what was going on in America, I thought there was the beginning of a civil war happening here, and I didn't want to be part of it. I was wearing the wrong uniform.
I was drafted in August of 1970 and had my basic training and advanced infantry training at Fort Ord, which was on the Central California coast near Monterey.
When I graduated in 1968, I was discharged from the enlisted Marine Corps and commissioned as a lieutenant and went on active duty. First generation immigrants thought themselves very lucky to be in this country. And they were very patriotic and thought that we had a responsibility and an obligation to give back. So my father did, and most of my relatives, some of whom came over illegally, but they actually all served, most of them served in the military. So listening to their stories and hearing about my obligations as well. Plus, it was a time of patriotic fervor, I think, with Kennedy as president telling us we should ask what we should do for our country. And so we caught on to all that, and that probably influenced me somewhat too.
I was a couple of months away from graduation from college. So that might give you a hint as to how strongly I felt I needed to join up.
I had a couple of different scholarships. I had an athletic scholarship. I had a national merit scholarship, all of that. But I didn't have any money to go to college on. I was in a career program and playing in a band, long hair, drums, you know. The last thing on my mind, the last thing I would ever want to do was join the military and go to the other side of the world and be shot at.
I was in the Marines. I actually was in the Marine Corps and going to college at the same time. So the first 4 years of my service in the Marine Corps, from what was the years? 64. I'm sorry, 64. 1964. I joined the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps allowed me to go to college. They didn't pay for my college, but they allowed me to go to college. And when I graduated in 1968, I was discharged from the enlisted Marine Corps.
Once drafted, by law, men had to show up and serve. Some chose not to, burning their draft card and running to Canada. Some went willingly, and many went despite not wanting to go.
I guess the societal pressure is the best way to put that. The decisions that the World War II generation made were made from entirely different motives, and the country and the individuals in it suffered greatly through that war.
When you get drafted, there was no guarantee that you were going to go to a combat zone. I mean, there were other areas that you could serve. So there was no guarantee that, just because you were drafted, you're going to go to Vietnam. Okay, so a little reluctance initially, but I accepted it as this is what it is.
I was a platoon commander with the 26th Marine Infantry. It was a time of that's what you do in a war zone. You fight and you kill people, and you try not to get killed yourself, and you blow a lot of stuff up, and you try to survive. And the area I was in was it was not in the cities. I was out in the boonies most of the time. So we did a lot of small unit type operations rather than big, massive operations, which characterized the Vietnam War earlier on, maybe in the mid-60s. It's a guerrilla warfare when and where you don't really know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is, or the bad woman or good woman is, or bad child or good child. So it doesn't take long before when you can't tell who the enemy is and who the good guy is, everyone who's Vietnamese becomes a threat. And when everyone becomes a threat, everyone becomes the enemy. And when they become the enemy, they're liable to be killed in order to ensure that they don't kill us. So certainly, we had no respect for civilian life, and we burned down villas and hooches and huts and all sorts of things, and many people would get killed either intentionally or as collateral damage. You know what collateral damage is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and and that's the way we used to make ourselves feel better about it. Well, he was or she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I firmly believe that not only is there atrocity in war, but all war is atrocity.
All military personnel are basically trained for combat. I mean, that's the initial. However, my occupation, if you will, in Vietnam was not directly combat. I was assigned as a repair specialist. Okay, I volunteered for and I worked with on a contact team, a 3-man contact team. We would travel to each individual unit of the 82nd. We only served with the 82nd. We didn't go outside of the other units. We served because each unit has their own specialists, right? I and my 2 members served on what they call a contact team. Combat-wise, each one of us, aside from your basic equipped, which was your M16 rifle, had a specialty weapon, a sidearm, if you will. One of my members had the M16 machine gun. The other member had a rocket launcher, and I had what is called the M79, which is a sort of a sawed-off shotgun. It's a grenade launcher, and I would carry. You've seen in cowboy pictures or whatever, a bandolero except these were small grenades. Okay, and whenever we went out, we would always be equipped, fully equipped, because you never know when roadside attack or whatever. So we at all time had to be fully equipped. Direct combat, we've had a couple of that we were involved, a couple of scrimmages, okay, but nothing like the infantry, and I certainly will not take credit for anything that the infantry personnel endured, okay? I would be lying if I did, all right? That's, please.
As I indicated to you earlier, I did spend my entire time in combat, in the jungle, on the floor, living in the jungle. I actually got back for 3 days out of the entire year. By the way, the year is a tour of duty over there. There were 3 days out of the entire year that I was not in the jungle. And those of us who were in the jungle all the time, always in combat or suffering the threat of combat, had a tremendous distaste for the fellas and women. There weren't too many women at that time. The fellas who were in the rear area. I think I mentioned earlier there were about 95 for every 5.
I was primarily a truck mechanic and then body and fender and welder and like that. I was hanging trucks back together. But as a part of that, we were drivers and got to drive trucks on convoys, and that got me into a couple of really tight situations. I took a load of ammunition to the Battle of Dak To in November of '67. It was a horrendous trip. The truck right ahead of me hit a mine and evaporated, disappeared, and call it rockets coming in, mortars coming in, sappers crawling through the wire with explosive charges on their belt, trying to blow up things.
My first time under fire was my first day, and it was a botched approach. We were choppered out. We were supposed to meet our squad, and we were put down on the wrong hill, is what it boiled down to. And there was nobody there to meet us except for people who wanted to kill us. So the LZ was what we called a hot LZ. Hot meaning you're under fire. LZ is a landing zone, of course. And the helicopter crew chief encouraged us all to get off his helicopter real fast, so we did. And I rolled down the side of a hill, helmet going one direction, rucksack going another direction. I had no idea what was going on. None. Nothing in training can prepare you for a live fire. Nothing can. So, but the chopper as soon as we got off, the chopper gained altitude and circled around and covered us while we made our connections with the squad mail. So that was first time. It was terrifying. It was disorienting. There's no real way to describe the intensity. It overwhelms. It overwhelms your senses. You lose, or for me, I lose peripheral vision in those kinds of stressful situations. Actually never fired my weapon because I didn't know which way to fire it. One of the first things you learn under fire is you can't trust your ears to tell you what direction you're being fired upon from. Your ears can be deceived and are deceived constantly. So you have to trust what you see or what someone else sees, but you can't trust what you hear. And this, to me, it sounded like there was fire all around, weapons fire all around, and there wasn't. It was just coming from one direction. So, it was the start of the lesson learning. It was the start of the term in the Army is OJT, which is on the job training. So it was kind of the start of my OJT, and but any time I try to describe it, or any time I guess anybody tries to describe it, it's pretty overwhelming. Pretty overwhelming to try to understand the impacts of it.
There was no alternative. You had to have each other's back, quite physically and quite literally.
There was never a safe time in Vietnam. It was a guerrilla war, and there was just always a threat.
It was scary initially. I mean,
honest, my biggest fear was the people who I was responsible for dying. So I was probably more concerned keeping them alive than I was staying alive myself. But I think that's part of the mentality of leadership, especially in the Marine Corps anyway, and sure, it's every service. I don't think you have closer relationships with anyone, closer than the people that you serve in combat with. The service does that. It's part of the indoctrination. And the military has learned that when things get crazy, you don't kill and die for flag or country or God or idealism or anything else. You kill and die for the people next to you. So that's an important part of the conditioning process that people go through when they are trained, boot camp or basic training, to become killers. So the services know that, and they gear towards that, and they do a really good job, because you really do love the people, and you would probably die for them, and many people have and do.
I was concerned. Obviously, you're concerned about your own life, your own self-preservation. I mean, thousands had died by that time.
Scared completely to death, shaken, and I mean, it's nothing that I take great pride in, but oh my God, I mean, to be involved in something like that, and death is all around you. There's bullets zinging over your head and explosions going off and everything. It was just absolutely overwhelming. I kept my head down, tried not to do anything stupid, tried not to do anything that would jeopardize the guys around me. But it was overwhelming, and you know, I wasn't GI Joe by any means.
Stress, fears, the camaraderie made it that much easier. Okay, like I stated, we all depended on each other. Okay, we didn't have to depend on. I mean, I'm not going to say there wasn't drugs around or alcohol, but nobody, at least in my unit per se, whatever, was really deeply into any heavy drugs or anything like that.
There were 3 Vietnamese young ladies. One of them ended up being killed in a way where she exploded, and there were a lot of us around, and part of her life, her body fluids splattered all over my face and down the front of my shirt and everything. And that was, well, that was November of 67. So that's what, 51 years ago? I've washed my face a gazillion times over that 51 years. I can't wash those stains away.
As the war dragged on, some soldiers in Vietnam began to refuse missions. Others, unable to cope with the constant stress of combat, sometimes refused or were unable to continue fighting.
Called the GI movement, that people refused to fight. I didn't have that problem. Again, I guess maybe I was lucky. Maybe not. Maybe I wasn't lucky. Maybe we should have done that. But I didn't experience that. I know of one. Wasn't in my platoon, but in another platoon of my company, of a guy who had enough, and he just refused to go out. So when we would go out, depending on where we were going, we would go by helicopter, chopper out, and we would all go to the landing pad and wait for the chopper to come and get on a chopper and go, fight somewhere. And he just refused to go. And he was in country maybe 8 months already and just had enough and refused to go. They didn't handle it very well. They actually built one of these, they called them a tiger cage, a cage like, put him in and let him stay by the landing, the chopper pad. And as the other Marines going by getting on the chopper, many of them had not nice things to say to him about his cowardice, which they saw it as. And so that was an awful experience for him. I'm sure that was not something he easily forgot about.
Last about 6 weeks or so, 6 or 7 weeks maybe, I was trying to reconstruct it in my mind the other day. We came to the rear for Thanksgiving, and see, I was there January to January. So they gave us, they rotated us back to the rear for Thanksgiving, and we had, the traditional turkey and dressing and stuff. The cooks had really done a good job on chow. And there was a kindly first sergeant who decided that maybe my nickname in the Army was Smitty. and his was also Smitty because his last name was Smith. And he's as we were getting ready to head back out to the helipad, he said, "Smitty, come with me," and kind of let the rest of the unit go back out to the firebase. And he said, "I have something I want you to work on." And I think he'd seen that I'd had enough. There wasn't any advantage to sending me back out. But I was probably more a danger to myself and my fellow soldiers than I was to the enemy at that point. And he found me some make work duties around the camp, just things to keep me busy. And I didn't see it at the time. I didn't see it for what a humanitarian gesture it was and what a compassionate gesture it was.
Tell you exactly. I was going to make the world safe for democracy. I grew up in the 50s, early 60s, when we didn't have the range and breadth of expression and knowledge and information that you guys are growing up with. I recall growing up with one thing and one thing only, and that was America, right or wrong. Anything the United States did was perfect. And that's what we were fed in every classroom, in every newspaper, in the streets, and so forth. I followed. If they waved the flag, I saluted it. I believed anything that was told. I thought I was there for the right reason for a very short while. For about, I would guess, 3 or 4 weeks. And then it became overwhelmingly obvious that that was wrong. As soon as we started interacting with the locals, with the native Vietnamese people, and feeling and becoming part of the war, we realized very quickly we were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I was, again, coming from a family of very patriotic. I thought that, well, I say it's kind of a blind, my country right, or I actually remember myself saying that, which I'm kind of embarrassed about today, but my country right or wrong. So I thought that I had an obligation to serve, to give back. And I really thought that my country would not ask me to do something that was wrong. So kind of blindly, without questioning, I decided that if they say it's right, it must be right. So I had to do it. It didn't take me long, however, to realize that something was not right with this, that I was not being told things that were true. I was being deceived and misled. And there didn't seem to me to be any reason for it. Didn't seem to be any purpose of it. We didn't seem to be going anywhere that would bring about a successful resolution of it. And to be honest, I kind of even, when I went there, I didn't really believe I was going to Vietnam to kill human beings. I kind of thought I was going to exorcise demons. And the way they appeared and disappeared, it almost reinforced that view of them as demons. When I first went, I bought all those lies and hype. I mean, I thought it was about communism, and I thought it was about stopping them in Vietnam before they came here in this country, and I thought we were protecting the South Vietnamese from the invasion of the communist hordes from the north, and I bought onto all that. But as you serve in country and you see the people and you really understand that they don't know or care anything about politics or ideologies, they just live and go from day to day. So that was kind of my motivation. I bought onto it. I blindly, unquestioningly went along, and that certainly I think the process was gradual. You do some things, and you first say, well, I'm only a lowly lieutenant, and I just with the platoon, so I don't know what the grand picture here is. Maybe I'm just out of the loop, so I don't know what's really going on. So they must know better than me. So at least initially, you give them the benefit of the doubt that there's some sanity to all of this, even though it's hard to find sanity in war. But as you realize that there isn't, when you realize eventually, and I don't think it takes all that long, maybe a couple of months, especially when you see people getting killed, your own people. Certainly your own people affect you, and that's awful. But your own people's death affects you a lot more than the deaths of others. So when you start having your own people die, but you realize what you're doing to other people, and you don't see any purpose in it. I would say a couple of months in that I started to say, this doesn't make sense. And one of the, I mean, by the time I got back from Vietnam, after I spent 13 months there, when I got back from Vietnam, I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, which is in North Carolina. And the commandant of the Marine Corps, that's the honcho, the head of the Marine Corps, for some reason wanted to meet with a bunch of returning officers to discuss what was going on. So now I just thought that he wanted to hear from us about, what our views are about how to win or what we should do. My view was to get out. But when we met with him, and it must have been about 8 of us, 9 of us, 10 of us, who had just come back, all officers, lieutenants and captains. And we didn't really get a chance to talk at all. He wanted to do all the talking, and he did. And we were amazed how out of touch he was. We ended up looking at each other, and after he left, actually saying to each other, does this guy have any idea what's going on over there? Because clearly he doesn't, based upon what he's saying here. So if I wasn't convinced earlier on, that certainly showed me that this war is insane, and that no one is really on top of what's going on over there.
We did not try to put political emphasis. You did your thing, if you will, for lack of better wording there. You were sent there for a mission. Okay? Leave politics out of it. Okay? Let the politicians not fight the war. They want to fight the war, put on a uniform, get a weapon, come out here in the field and, join us. Okay? I was not a Vietnam favorite. Like I said, even though when I was still in Bronx Community College, the war was not, because you used to see films every night. Excuse me. You used to see footage every night, Walter Cronkite and all the other, these horrible things going on. It was difficult. It was difficult to try to reconcile, why are we there?
As the level of our involvement in Vietnam became more apparent, anti-war movements started to gain traction in America. Vietnam was the first war to allow the press full access to the battlefield. American committed war crimes and death tolls were public information delivered on a nightly basis. As the years dragged on, the war seemed to become futile in the eyes of many Americans. The anti-war movement intended to bring the devastation the war had caused to the forefront of political conversation, to attain a higher level of transparency between the government and the public. Yet a consequence of many Americans being adamantly opposed to the war resulted in veterans falling victim to public scrutiny and misjudgment from both anti-war parties and conservative ones that blamed the soldiers for losing the war. The process of weaving veterans back into society was difficult and left many soldiers struggling to find work or return to normalcy. Because Vietnam was the first war the United States had ever lost, many Americans suppressed the events, resulting in most Americans being oblivious to the true history of the Vietnam War, leaving veterans without the support and understanding they deserved.
Okay, and that's one of the biggest issues, is the coming home. We were not welcomed. That's still haunting many, many Vietnam veterans. Okay, we were spat on. We were called baby killers. I have experienced myself an incident where I was spat on not once but twice. Not a very comforting experience when you came home serving your country and people literally spit at you because you did what you felt was the proper thing to do.
To just say that to somebody, just say, hey, welcome home. And so, yeah, it was a sad chapter in our country's history, and I'm glad we didn't repeat it. In recent wars, we seem to have learned to separate our opinions about the war with our treatment of those who fought it.
I appreciate the feeling that is behind that. At the same time, I like to say, please don't thank me for my service. And I don't confront anybody, but I've done a couple of articles for the paper and so forth. Please don't thank me for my service. I was taken against my will. I was made to see things and do things that I never, ever, ever should have done. And, that's long ago and in the past. It did not make me the person I am. Please, let's take me at what I am today, and let's deal with that.
And we did have a tough time because we lost that war. So we didn't come marching home as heroes down Fifth Avenue like they did after World War II.
I think continuing my work against war and educating people about war is part of my penance, if you will, for the sacrilege of war that I was part of. So yeah, I do. War never leaves you. War stays with you for the rest of your life.
There was a guy next to me. You had to fly in uniform to get the rate, And when I sat down next to him, he asked stewardess if he could be moved to another seat. I flew to Dallas. Same thing there. I got on the plane, sat down next to a man, and he just said, do you mind if I get changed to another seat? Okay, that's odd, but that's not earth-shaking. Came home in the airport. I got out of that uniform, stomped my hat flat, put it on the whole uniform in the trash, and swore I would never ever wear it again for the rest of my life. Got into jeans and a t-shirt.
Many veterans had trouble coping with what they witnessed and experienced. An estimated 200,000 Vietnam veterans have PTSD to this day, more than 40 years after the war has ended, with insufficient treatment being offered.
One of the issues that I am coping with, and has been an ongoing issue, I'm actually in treatment, believe it or not, right now. You hear it more and more, is PTSD. When I came home, the premise was, you're shell shock. Don't worry about it. You'll grow out of it. Unfortunately, being, like I said, because I was involved in a lot of areas where combat situations were around, and I was not privy, I won't say privy, that's a bad word, but I had to be there, okay, experience the combat, right? Certain things stay in my mind. And one of them is lashing out. And the man came up to me and, hey, Jack, how are you? And tapped me on the back. I turned around and just went for the guy's throat. and the security man, security guard, he didn't realize, like what, I'm, but I'm still, certain things I still react to. So the Vietnam situation hasn't gotten out of my mind.
The trauma of combat is only a part of what has traumatized veterans. Death and destruction is overwhelming. By every estimate, more than 200,000 Vietnam veterans have committed suicide. And the people that do a lot of research into this and are trying to work with it will tell you that that number is very artificially low. It's probably way more than that. Somewhere along the line, you have to ask yourself why. We have the same problem with Iraq War and Afghanistan War veterans and people in the military and active duty today, which is a very separate category, but the suicide rate among our military is through the roof, absolutely unprecedented. And you need to ask yourself why, and what it, the answer that I've come up with, and I've been at the edge of that numerous times, is the things we've seen, the inhumanity to man, one man to another, is so disturbing. Call it the moral damage. There's all kinds of names for it, but it's so disturbing that you just can't put that together with what you learned in Sunday school or what your parents taught you and rationalize it. The modern weaponry we use, the tactics that we use are inhumane. And, how can you have a humane war? Well, I'm not sure how you do that. Maybe we ought to wonder whether we need to keep basing our economy on war and death and destruction. It's all very, very, very troubling. And people are finding that, in retrospect, sitting looking at what they did and what they experienced, they can't put up with the guilt and everything anymore, and they take their own lives. It's a very, very sad statistic. It tells you an awful lot about the morality of what we're doing and our national policies, and I've chosen just to oppose it, not to be part of it.
And just talking like two crabby old grunts talk, and I asked him, I said, hey, when do the nightmares stop? And he just shook his head. He said, Jim, they never do. And that's the price. That's the lifetime of price that people pay, and that we as citizens need to understand. When we send people to war, that's what we're asking.